How's it going, guys? What's up? Moses here with another video guide for you. Today I am going to be talking about Delcir. Yeah, so people have been asking me what's up and what's best for solo Wizard Great Rift build, and that's the build. Just a quick reference, you can always check the leaderboards. If you forget, pretty much everybody is running the same build right now. It's the top tier build, running the same items, same build, pretty similar stuff. So you guys can just check people on the leaderboard. But for the sake of the video, we're gonna start. Basically, Delcir, you get 2000% increased damage to enemies that are inside your slow time bubbles. That's the six-piece set. So from Arcane Orb, Energy Twister, etc., etc., etc. Right? So that's a lot of damage. You get a bunch of other damage modifiers, such as Unstable Scepter. You get 65%, up to 65% extra Arcane Orb damage. You get increased damage from your Orb of Infinite Depth. Increased damage by up to 5% times 4 times. It stacks up to 4 times, and also gives you damage reduction. So 60% damage reduction and up to 20% increased damage from the Orb of Infinite Depth. You can get also Arcane Orb on the boots. Some more increased damage. You get increased damage from Triumvirate. This goes in your cube, right? And another increased damage you get from your passive, Arcane Dynamo. So you'll be using Spectral Blades in order to get shields, and because the Shame of Delcir will increase your generator attack speed by 50%. And by doing so, you'll also buff yourself with 5 flashes of insight. Using Arcane Dynamo, so when you're right-clicking to use Arcane Orb with the Orbit rune, this will deal 60% more damage. So the gameplay will pretty much be attack, 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 5 stacks, attack, 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 5 stacks, right-click. That will pretty much be your gameplay, right? And every once in a while you'll throw in an Explosive Blast, and you gotta make sure that the Explosive Blast does not consume your flashes of insight. Right? If you're gonna go flashes of insight and then use Explosive Blast, this is a spender and it will consume your Arcane Dynamo flashes of insight stacks. You really do not want to do that. Explosive Blast is solely here in order to increase your damage with the Orb of Infinite Depth and also give you damage reduction. Okay, so let's go for the build. We talked about the Barrier Blades for the shields and to buff up your Arcane Dynamo. And also, by using any signature spell with the Triumvirate, you'll stack up to 600% more damage to your Arcane Orb. Second is the Arcane Orbit, which is your main damage dealer. Slow time. You can either go with Exhaustion or with Stretch Time. Either way. I prefer Exhaustion because on high Greater Rifts monsters do a lot of damage and you get another damage reduction through here. But you can also go Stretch Time, and then increase your attack speed by 10%, which will give you faster flashes of insight. So you can go both ways. But for the most part, we go Exhaustion. Crystallized Armor, the same synergy we have since last season. Halo of Arliss, Ancient Parthan Defenders, and Crystallized Armor for maximum toughness and damage reduction. Whenever you're surrounded by a bunch of mobs, you'll proc Frost Nova, that will give you also 60% damage reduction from your Ice Armor, and will also proc Stun, so that enemies within 25 yards will reduce damage taken by 11%. Also, since you're pretty much always going to be at maximum resource, you always get the Aquila Cuirass bonus. It will only drop for short duration when you're right clicking for Arcane Orbit, or when you're using your explosive blaster. The rest of the time, since you're constantly casting your flashes of insight, right? You're constantly casting your spectral blades. You'll constantly have up to 90% or higher resource available, and that way you'll get the Aquila Cuirass bonus, which is 50% damage reduction. Yeah, again, the spectral blades will also increase generation of arcane power by 10. You can roll up to 12, but yeah, it really doesn't make much of a difference. When it comes to the items, you equip the complete full set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You put a gem in the Helm of Life. It's important to have a lot of percent life. I have about 930k HP. It's good to have a lot of vitality since you're getting 4% shield. 4% out of your maximum life as a shield per attack. And that stacks up to, well, you can see the shield number at the top here, about 200k-ish. So that's kind of a nice damage absorption. You'll use Convention of Elements because it's really strong. Even this season, you'll use the Endless Walk set, the Traveler's Pledge, and the Compass Rose. These will give you a bonus when you're standing still, up to 100% damage, and when you're walking around, you'll start stacking up the damage reduction, and you'll get up to 50% damage reduction and up to 100% increased damage. You can see when you're standing still, the defensive damage, the defensive stacks go down, and the offensive stacks go up to 100% increased damage. And I guess that's pretty much it. You would want to stack a lot of area damage. They fixed area damage, so whenever you can get area damage, it works. It works really well, and you would want as much as you can. On the weapon, ideally, you would want a weapon like this with much higher average damage, and then probably area damage instead of life per hit. This is my weapon, still early in the season. I've tried to get something better, didn't really work, but that's the one I have so far. When it comes to the legendary gems you'll put on the gear, we're talking about Bane of the Trapped, as always. Here we're using Esoteric Alteration. Some people use Bane of the Trapped rank 25 because it increases your attack speed, so you can gather more flashes of insight and cast Arcane Orb much faster for much more higher damage output. But for the most part, you really need that damage reduction, so you'll be really able to stand there amidst all the arcane that goes on, the electrified, plague, frozen, enchanted, whatnot, poison enchanted, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much, I went through all the items. We'll go through the last on the skills. We got Teleport, Safe Passage for more damage reduction, Illusionist to proc both Teleport and Slow Time, Unstable Anomaly. Some run with Unwavering Will. You can try that out. I personally think that Unstable Anomaly is better. And Audacity, because you are in melee range and you deal 30% increased damage. This is a melee wizard build. Alright, so this is the build that you'll be doing for solo. For groups, it's pretty much similar. Only instead of boots with Arcane Orb, you'll be using Energy Twister. Instead of the Shame of Delcir, you'll be using a Witching Hour. And instead of the Unstable Scepter, you'll use the Twisted Sword. So yeah, you want a lot of attack speed on this build. It is never better to use attack speed instead of area damage on gloves and such. Ideally, if I could, I would roll attack speed instead of that cooldown reduction, or area damage instead of that cooldown reduction on my ring, just to give you an idea. And yeah, I would still keep these 3 rolls on the conventional elements. The build changes slightly. This build goes for groups, right? So we're using the Twisted Sword, the Energy Twister build. We use the Twisted Sword. So we're going to be using Energy Twister with Raging Storm. What it does is whenever 2 Energy Twisters collide, they Oops, I did not select the thing. Okay. So whenever two energy twisters collide, they merge into one big twister. That's a small twister, that's another small twister, together one big twister that keeps spinning for 6 seconds and deal 3,200% weapon damage over 6 seconds. That's a lot of damage, and you keep spamming it. Now, instead of the arcane orbit, we're not going to be using. What we'll use here is magic weapon with conduit to be able to generate more arcane power. We'll use, instead of arcane dynamo, since we don't have any primary abilities here to generate, or generators, we do not buff ourselves with arcane dynamo. That's not how it works. We're going to be using power hungry. Power hungry gives us basically free spenders for each health globe we pick up, stacks up to 10 times. Okay, now how this build works is pretty simple. It's very similar. I mean, everything else is just the same. We still want arcane damage. This damage type is arcane. Arcane orbit is also arcane damage. Ideally, again, on the amulet you would want that 20% instead of intelligence, but that traveler's pledge is really the best one that I could find. And yeah, the way that this build works is it scales with how many energy twisters that you have out. Energy twisters damage is increased by 125 to 150% for each energy twisters that you have out. So the more you have out, the more damage they do. Of course, when I play solo, I cannot have more than, this build is solely for groups, and I cannot generate more than 2 or 3. And you see there's the stacks over here. It lasts for 6 seconds. It would be nice if like number 2 here would show in like some kind of a dark color, because it's really hard to see what the number is or how many stacks you have, but whatever. But this shows you how many stacks you have and how many energy twisters you have out. But basically, the idea is to have as many energy twisters as you possibly can, and stand still so you can get the Traveler's Pledge, Compass Rose, Endless Walk set bonus, and have other people collect globes for you and generate globes for you. This build is for groups. For groups only. You have these 2 buffs up, and that's pretty much it. You teleport for safe passage and damage reduction, you have your bubble out, and then you throw out as many of these as you can. In a group you have barbarians, monks, witch doctors. They all generate health globes for you and picking them up for you, so that you will have infinite arcane power. So in this build you don't have to do anything. You just need to have your arcane power as much and as fast as possible. That's the build. Very small changes. One last thing about Paragon points. You always want to max out your movement speed, since... Yeah, before I forget. In this build we'll use Hail of Arliss, but we'll not use Aquila Cuirass, because the damage reduction 50% we're going to get from the Barbarians Ignore Pain. Here we're going to use Reaper's Wraps, and we're going to use Furnace for increased damage against elites. That's the only change that we're going to do in the cube for the group build. And the legendary gems will remain the same. We'll have the Stricken, the Esoteric Alteration, and the Convention of Elements. If you're running slightly lower Greater Rift, let's say 70, 65s with a group, and you have like the entire setup, 75s, maybe even 80s, I don't think Traveler's Pledge, Bane of the Stricken is worthwhile. I would actually use Zystone of Vengeance, since you always get the proc whenever you cast your bubble. You'll always get the proc of Bane of the Trapped, and since you're in a distance, quite a lot of the time you can also get a pretty nice and significant damage boost against monsters that are slightly ranged. Yeah, you should test it out. I tested out a little bit. On 75 I felt like Zystone is making a huge difference. a huge difference. Instead of running Banner Stricken is only good against bosses and extremely high greater rifts, and mostly for solo against the boss. Really cuts down the time that you're doing it in solo against the Rift Guardian. But for groups, at least, I don't know, mid 70s, early 70s, even late 70s, up to 80 or such. If it's higher than 80 stricken, but lower than that, I would use Zystone. And yeah, people pick up the globes for you. You'll have infinite resource. You have Reaper's Wraps, and which brings me back to the Paragon point. The only change is that on Paragon point in a group, I would always maximize movement speed first if I don't have it on gear. But in a group, I would also maximize arcane power, and then the rest on int. Right? But in solo, when I'm running solo, I do not need to have any arcane power bonus at all, because the arcane orbit build always puts you on maximum arcane power either way, and then the rest I'll put on intelligence. The only reason is that in a group I'll use Reaper's Wraps, and they restore 30% of your primary resource, so it scales with how much arcane power you have. The more arcane power you have, the more resource you're getting from Reaper's Wraps. So that's the only reason I would do that. This is the video. We talked about the two builds for solo and for Greater Rift pushing with the DLC. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, share, like, subscribe, etc., etc. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. I always read those. And drop by and visit the stream. Thanks for watching.